Time for some post-spring superlatives.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. Unfortunately, that's going to be it today as Lars Hansen still having some technical issues, so hopefully we'll be back with him on Monday. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Got a really fun show coming at all of you today, but just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure you click that subscribe button down below and click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new video. And if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure you leave us a 5-star review. It all really does help us a lot. And make sure you follow us on social media in that same regard. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Locked On Huskies, posting fun stuff every single day for all the everydayers out there. So with that being said, a really fun show. 247 Sports on the Ultimate College Football Show, they put Demond Williams as the number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten. You'll love to see that. We're also talking about David Schwerzel, a 3-star edge rusher from O'Day High School, got a UW crystal ball from 247 Sports. We'll get into that a little bit, but the Spring Award Show, I thought this would be a lot of fun. So I went through and I drew up 4 categories here. We've got offensive MVP, defensive MVP, we got most improved player, and we've got the best early enrollee freshman, giving them a little bit of love as well. So with that said, let's just start, as I got my list here, let's start on top with the offensive MVP. For me, that was Jordan Washington this spring, where this spring was really interesting in terms of the way just practices are run, because not necessarily in terms of they were different from Jedd Fisch's first year, but just in terms of some of the injuries and some of the senior guys, where we got to talk to John Coleman a couple different points during the spring. And one of the things he told us was, yeah, it was a little weird just having such a light workload throughout spring, because at the same time, I have to sit here and remind myself that I've earned it. So with that being said, we saw a lot more of Adam Muhammad this spring. We saw a lot more of Jordan Washington as well. And the reason I went with Jordan Washington is we saw a lot of nice play from the receivers. We saw some drops from them at points. So I looked at that and I said, Rasheed Williams, who was probably my top contender if I looked at a wide receiver, we've seen him do this before. We saw him do it last spring and last fall. So I wanted to go with somebody who flew a little bit more under the radar and we haven't seen nearly as much from. And from what we saw from Jordan Washington this spring was so impressive. We saw them use him in all sorts of different packages, whether it be just as a running back, as a wide receiver at different points in time. They brought him on a whole bunch of different motions across formation, which was interesting to see. And it just showed that he is going to be a really fun gadget player at different points of time. I know I made this comparison on the show before, but kind of like a 2017 Savon Ahmed, where you have a guy with legit 4.3 speed, which Savon was at the time before he gained some weight on his way to the NFL Combine, but with that legit top-end speed, who you can just find different ways to put the ball in his hands, and he's going to go to work for you. We saw him, it was inside, so it was only a 60-yard touchdown, but outside at Husky Stadium, it would have been an 80-yard score. Just break through and just show that top-end speed at so many different points. We saw him catch the ball out of the backfield. We saw Washington go to him on 4th and short and down on the goal line in different points of time as well. And it's just one thing where the more I look at what Jordan Washington brings to the table, I don't know how much we're going to see from him this season, because he's going to be that third running back, like I said, behind Jonah Coleman, behind Adam Muhammad. So there are going to be different points this year where I look at what Jordan brings to the table, and it's, oh yeah, maybe he got 4 or 5 touches that week, and maybe he was used as a decoy on a couple of different snaps. But he's somebody who I loved what I saw from him this spring, and as he continues to develop, I think he's going to be a major weapon for this coaching staff, so I'm really excited to see where his development goes from here. On to the defensive MVP. This one was easy. It was Rahshawn Clark, where 7 interceptions in just over the course of 13 practices. That 14th one before the spring game was a walkthrough. So 7 picks, 13 practices. We get out onto the field for the spring game, and he forces and recovers a fumble as well. So it's not just that, right? The turnovers are great, and certainly what, pushed him over the top compared to guys like Anterio Thompson. Leroy Bryant was somebody who was in the mix for this as well for me. But I look at what Rahshawn Clark did this spring, and I think that he is going to be critical for this defense this fall, because I look at the outside corners. We know those are set in Takari Davis and Fishians Prysock. I think Rahshawn Clark has locked himself into this nickel role as well. And the more I look at him, the more I just see what he's going to do in this Ryan Walters defense, and why when Jordan Shaw hit the transfer portal and ended up at Texas A&M, I wasn't necessarily overly concerned, because these were things that we saw Rahshawn Clark do mainly as a safety in high school, where he does have great ball skills. He did play on both sides of the ball in high school, and Giles Jackson told us last fall that that's something that he wouldn't be surprised if he ends up doing here at some point in time, but that's not the discussion for today. The discussion is he was so impressive at that nickel spot, where the one thing that he did better than I want to say I saw from anybody at the position last year was tackle. And he is just so physical when he comes downhill. He's like a heat-seeking missile. It's really nice to see just the way he fits runs, the way he blitzes. It's just really encouraging when I think about this Ryan Walters defense, where not only is he going to have to play a lot of man coverage, but he's going to have to come downhill and help in run support a lot, especially when we see some of these 5 down fronts that I know they didn't show a lot of in the spring game, but is certainly something we're going to see more of this fall, especially when you go back and watch film of Ryan Walters' defense at Purdue, at Illinois, at Missouri even as well. So that's something that I keep in mind, because when running backs are able to elude that last man, where whoever's setting the edge, whether it be an outside linebacker, a defensive tackle, or defensive end, really, whoever is just that last man on the line of scrimmage. If a running back is able to break, contain, and get outside, if that's the side that Rahshawn Clark is playing on, he's going to have to be that man to come downhill and just not allow a big run. So I'm curious to see how well he's going to be able to do that this fall, because we saw him do it very, very well during spring practice. And I think that's going to be a crucial part of his game and just what he brings to the table. So I look at just everything that he did, and I was really, really impressed by it. And a lot of times he had to go up against the best early enrollee, and that was Chris Lawson. And I was really torn here, because it wasn't just Chris Lawson, wasn't just Raiden Vinesbright, but I wanted to give John Mills some love as well, because John Mills really did impress. And the more we saw of him throughout spring practice, we saw him grow, we saw him mature. And he's somebody who I know a lot of people aren't necessarily too keen on true freshmen playing along the offensive line, but physically he looks and just acts the part of somebody who can compete in the Big Ten. Maybe not as a starter. I think that's still going to be Paki Finau's job to lose this fall, but he's somebody who, as a rotational piece at that position, is going to be very important, most likely playing left guard for you. So he was somebody I was impressed with, but he didn't do enough to overtake Chris Lawson, in my opinion, because Chris Lawson just came in and, a lot like John Mills did in a very different way, just looked the part at his position. And I was so impressed with the amount of times that not just Damon Williams, but Kai Horton, Dash Byerly, Tristan Keeney McMillan, whoever he was paired with, they just always seemed to really just develop a chemistry with him quickly and then look his way a lot. I remember in the second spring scrimmage, he had something like 4 touchdowns where they ran an extended red zone period. So that certainly helps there as well. But he just seemed to be the first read on so many plays. And with Denzel Boston not practicing in spring, Omari Evans barely practicing in the spring, and then Rasheed Williams getting hurt towards the end of practices, or just the end of camp as well, you need to find somebody to throw to. And it was just very telling that Chris Lawson was that guy. So I was very impressed with him, and he certainly deserved his love and his flowers for just everything he did this spring to come in early and just never look overwhelmed when it comes to the playbook, when it comes to all sorts of different things. There were a couple different times where I noticed he would be lining up with one of his true freshman classmates, whether it be Raiden Vinesbright or Marcus Harris, and just helping align them as well. So it's little things like that I know the coaching staff really appreciates as well. All right, last one here, most improved. This one was pretty easy for me, to be honest, where I don't know if it's necessarily most improved in terms of he took the biggest step forward, or as we really just got to see more of him and he was so impressive in that role. It was Leroy Bryant, with Ephesians Prysock not practicing for the majority of the spring, Takario Davis going down and missing some time with an injury as well. Leroy stepped up and just showed, hey, I'm going to be CB3 on the outside this fall. And it's something where I love watching Leroy play and practice the way he does already. He's just a very physical, very instinctual player who just fits so well in this John Richardson defense. He doesn't have that elite 6'3", 6'4" frame with super long arms like the starting outside corners do, but the mentality that he has when he's playing press coverage to not let guys get clean releases, and the way he was able to do that consistently through 2 spring scrimmages and through just every single practice, every time you look Leroy Bryant's way, He had his hands on the opposing wide receiver in a clean way where he's not going to get flagged in a real game or anything like that. But just the way he was able to consistently attack the guy across from him and win battles time and time and time again was so impressive for me. And I couldn't be more confident about where this secondary group is going under John Richardson. But we're going to jump over to the recruiting trail for a minute because Washington might be on the verge of picking up another defensive lineman. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Fire TV. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. That's great news for me because I can play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. And if you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Like I said, that's great news for me because if I'm out on the road this fall covering UW football and I want to play my UW football dynasty in College Football 25, that's going to be great news. I love dropping into Verdansk and playing some Call of Duty. It's going to be so much easier with my Fire TV Stick. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass, Ultimate subscription, and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Cube. All right, let's jump over to the recruiting trail. Now, as I'm recording this on Thursday, David Schwerzel, 3-star edge rusher from O'Day High School right here in Seattle, who's ranked as the number 2 player in the state of Washington, got a crystal ball from the 247 Sports Predictor, which I'd never seen before. That's, another story for another day. Got a crystal ball prediction of Washington. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. The first one being, as of this moment, David does not have an official visit set up with Washington. Now, that's going off the 247 Sports reporting. It could be out there somewhere. I just haven't seen it personally. He's set to visit Cal, Stanford, UCLA, and Michigan State over the next couple of months. And I know he's also been really interested in Notre Dame. They offered him last month in April. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out on that front as well. And it's also, when I look at David, I see somebody who could end up playing inside full-time. He could play edge full-time. He could be a tweener. So as I look at what this defensive line class could turn into, if Washington is able to secure a commitment from Schwerzel, and let's just say by the end of the month, by the end of May, if they're able to do that by some point this month, I don't necessarily know how crowded that makes this edge room where you've got 2 commits right now, and if that happens in Derek Coleman-Brusa and David Schwerzel. Now, I look around the rest of this edge/defensive line group that Washington is recruiting. I see a couple more players that fit into that same mold that David Schwerzel is, where Fasiale, his teammate over at O'Day, is a big one. And then who I personally believe is the number 1 player on Washington's board right now at just regardless of position along the defensive line. That's Kari Wilder, the 4-star defensive lineman from Sarah High School down in Southern California. I look at all those guys and I say they fit into the same mold as David. And I'm curious because this is something I've hammered on the show over the last couple of weeks, that over the next 2 years, Washington will be graduating 13 defensive linemen, whether they be just edge, that outside linebacker position now, or defensive tackles. So you've got a major reload that you need to make just all across the defensive line. And as we know, Jedd Fisch wants to hammer that home from the high school ranks. So I look at all those guys, and Anthony Jones could fall into this department as well. I know he's listed in a similar vein to Derek Coleman-Brusa at 6'5", 265, I believe he is right now. So he's somebody with that size, with that frame. He could end up playing a little bit of a tweener role. I like him a little bit more as a pure edge, which is why I didn't mention Landon Barnes, the 4-star edge rusher from Duncanville High School in Texas either, because I think they just will end up playing a different position as they just get to the college level, where I look at David, I look at Ciale, Kari Wilder, and I think if you line those guys up at a 4-eye or a 5 technique a decent amount, you could find ways to have success with that, especially in this Ryan Walters scheme. So I think they want to take 2 guys in that mold where I wrote about this over on Huskies Wire. Our buddy Andy Yamashita did a great interview with Derek Coleman-Brusa after he committed. He said one person that he reached out to and asked for help just in terms of getting to know Ryan Walters and what it would be like playing in his scheme was Nick Scorton, a former edge rusher who played at Purdue, led the Big Ten in sacks actually with 10 in 2023 under Ryan Walters before transferring to Texas A&M in 2024 and being a second-round pick of the Carolina Panthers this past April. So I look at that and I say with Nick Scorton, I think that he kind of fits that role that they're looking for with Derek Coleman-Brusa, where he lined up outside in a wide nine a lot, just as a stand-up outside linebacker edge rusher. And I think that's what Derek is going to end up doing most of the time, where they move him inside a little bit when you go back and watch his film at Purdue in 2023. But so I think David doesn't necessarily fit that role very well, where I look at his size and I look at his frame, and then I look at what Taitai Uyunglele did this spring. And I think that David fits that role perfectly. Well, right now, David on 247 is listed at 6'4", 275. And I think he's got potential from what I've seen from him this spring when he was out on a couple of unofficial visits. I think he's got the potential to grow even more into that frame. So if he ends up playing a little bit more interior than he does on the outside, I wouldn't be shocked. And as I, get into some of the interior guys that Washington is looking at, I'm talking about 3-star defensive lineman Dakota Dixon from California, and T.I. Umukai is a favorite of this show from Cherry Creek High School in Colorado. I think that David just will end up falling a little bit more into that bucket, even though it says, edge rusher when you look at his profile on different recruiting sites. I think that that's just kind of what this coaching staff sees from him a little more, because he is very powerful and does have kind of that quick twitch that you want as a pass rusher on the interior to win against guards who might not necessarily have that same level of first step that, some of these defensive linemen do that can get into the backfield really quickly. A good UW comp that I like in that regard is Bryce Butler. I think he's got a phenomenal first step. So the reason, and to get back to the original point I was making, is Taitai Uyunglele. I think that David fits that role very, very well because we have seen Taitai line up as an edge rusher, that outside linebacker role again, in some of those bigger packages where you want somebody to just help stop the run. We've seen Deshaun Lynch do this a decent amount too. But then when you want somebody who can just create that matchup nightmare that you want against centers, against guards more so than centers, you move him inside. And that's where we've seen Taitai do the majority of his damage this spring. And I've still been impressed with what I've seen from him on the edge, but I look at what he's doing when he's lined up at that 5 technique, especially against guards, and he is consistently finding ways to win. So that's something where I feel like that's part of the development track that this coaching staff sees for David Schwerzel. So that's why, when I say I don't necessarily know if he's going to fit into that true edge rusher bucket that's what people are looking for, and you say, oh, well, this class might start being, just start filling up on the outside. That's why I don't think that that's kind of the case here. But it's also one of the reasons that I think Washington can find a way to fit 6 or even 7 defensive linemen into this class, because I think there are 3 buckets here. I think there are true defensive tackles. And in my opinion, Washington is recruiting one guy that fits that mold really well, and that's T.I. Umukai. And then there's that tweener bucket where Kari Wilder is that top priority for me, and still in my opinion, at that position where you've got Kari Wilder, Fasiale. I think Dakota Dixon falls into that as well, where he'd play, let's call it 95% of his snaps on the interior at the next level either way. But he's just got that size, and that if he can continue to just get more explosive, to find ways to just move around the formation a little bit. And then you've got that outside linebacker edge rusher bucket where Derek Coleman-Brusa falls into that. And then Anthony Jones and Landon Barnes fall into that mold as well. So the more I just kind of look at this class, I think that Washington is going to find a way to really reload. And then it's something Lars and I have talked about on this show more than once, where when you look at what Washington is not only losing over the next couple of years, but just the way that they want to attack this defense with Ryan Walters and just use so many defensive linemen, rotate them in and out very, very frequently. You need to find a way to just continue to make sure that group is restocked through the high school ranks where, as we've noted ad nauseum, Jedd Fisch wants to do the majority of his recruiting. If you can continue to do that, and especially just doing it in this class where you look at last year's and you had 4 defensive linemen, and that was fine, but you also knew that you needed to recruit through the portal ranks anyways, or else the defensive line was going to look a lot like it did last year, where it just struggled to stop the run consistently. And you just say, we know that's not Jedd Fisch's plan long-term. If they go out in December this year, let's say they do sign 6 defensive linemen, hypothetically. If you go out and sign 6 defensive linemen, you can still look at that and say, hey, we're losing a couple of true nose tackles in Logan Sagapolo, in Simone Peppa to the just to graduation, to being out of eligibility. So you can still go out and find somebody who fits that mold really well while developing a couple of guys behind him, whether it be Elenius Davis, whether it be Omar Khan, whoever you think fits that mold. I'm just throwing names out there. Dominic Macon might be another one in that department as well. I love his physicality and tenacity as a former wrestler and all that sort of stuff. But I think that that's somewhere you can still go attack the transfer portal for. But I look at all these other positions along the defensive line. This coaching staff has no problems playing these freshmen early. And it's something that was so important with this recruitment of Derek Coleman-Brusa is depending on who might want to go to the draft after this season, depending on how some things look along the defensive line, he can come in and find a way to contribute right away next season. And you can pair him with whoever you want to say sticks around. Isaiah Ward, Russell Davis, the names go on and on and on, Jacob Lane being another one. But I just continue to look at this class and to just put a bow on all this with David Schwerzel. I think that that's one of the reasons that just he is so important, is he fits so many needs in one player where you can continue to recruit more and more players that look like him and have that same sort of body type. Again, Kari Wilder is the top priority here. That's why I keep saying his name, because I have such a strong feeling this coaching staff looks at him and says, yeah, we know Bama, Georgia, Ohio State just got in the mix for him. We think that guy would be a game wrecker for us on day one sort of stuff. David Schwerzel, I don't think he falls in that boat of would come in and play 12, 13 games right away as a true freshman, but he has that same sort of potential thanks to his frame, thanks to his power, and a whole lot of other just traits that he has. And the more I watch him, the more I say, I understand why he's a priority get for the staff, but he's also not going to prevent you from going out and taking potentially even two other players that look and play just like him. So certainly something to keep an eye on there. And Damon Williams is always going to be a name to keep an eye on. And it was nice seeing him get some recognition from some of the more national podcasts. But we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com. 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. All right, let's have a little bit of fun to wrap this up. On the Ultimate College Football Show, 247 Sports Show, one of their analysts, Bud Elliott, ranked his top 5 quarterbacks for the 2025 season in the Big Ten. It's a little refreshing to see Damon Williams at number 2 on that list. So shout out to him for that. And I look at this and I just say there is no reason that he can't break the top 5, top 3. And it's something we've talked about on this channel for a long time. Shout out to our buddy Jake Butt from the Big Ten Network for coming on a month or two ago to help us out with that conversation as well, taking it a step further, honestly, and saying he could be a top 5 quarterback in all of college football by the end of the season. And it's just really refreshing to hear that, because it's one of those things that I feel like up here in the Pacific Northwest, in this little bubble, sometimes it doesn't get out like, oh, hey, look at what they have going on up there. Look at Washington. It feels like it took a long time when the show started in 2023 for that team that made it to the national championship to really get out and earn that respect. I think it took it really until that Oregon game for a lot of that to happen. Then even after that Arizona State win the week after, it was kind of like, oh, we don't know about this team. So I feel like that certainly plays a part of it and part of just all this as well. And obviously it's very fair for some people to not want to just come right out and say, hey, Damon Williams has everything it takes to be a top 5, top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten, because he's got 2 starts under his belt. That's completely fair. And Jedd Fisch has done the media rounds this offseason. He went on Good Morning Football. He went on the Rich Eisen show saying, hey, I think that the quarterback we have is elite. I think he's going to make it to New York City for the Heisman Trophy ceremony one of these days. So it's nice to hear your head coach obviously back you like that. But then I look into all of this and it goes deeper than that. Where let's break this down from an on-field play perspective first. I look at Damon, especially now that he's gained a little bit more weight. As he told us earlier in spring camp, he wants to be at 205 by the time the season starts, and it feels like he's well on his way to achieving that goal. He talked about how important that is for him when he's just putting his weight in the ground and trying to just put a little extra mustard on the ball, or when he's just trying to absorb hits and do different things when it comes to just running the ball as well. And he's retained that athleticism. That much is very, very obvious. So getting that extra weight on his frame is very important. And it's really nice to see that it is good weight. He's not just, bulking up and eating as much as he can, even though he did give a shout out to Shake Shack in that regard, to just make sure he can withstand hits at the Big Ten level. No, he's done it in a very efficient manner, which is nice to see. And as he continues to add weight, that's going to be important this fall. So that part of it, when it comes to just seeing it translate to on-field play, that's already happened. We've seen him have some extra velocity. He's made some really nice tight window throws throughout spring camp. And then the athleticism, it needs no introduction. During the first spring scrimmage, he had that 50-yard touchdown run. He's had a couple other just big runs this spring. I think of the spring game where it wasn't a big run, but he juked X-Ray Alexander out of his shoes. And even in a live game, I don't think X-Ray's making that tackle because Damon does have just that level of short area quickness and just change of direction, which is so much fun and so impressive to see. And the reason I want to start with all that is we saw him perform very well this spring. I think our buddy Christian Capel on Montlake had a really nice piece about just Damon's spring a couple of days ago. Go check out his site, by the way. He does phenomenal work over there on Substack. And one of the things he said was, even including Michael Penix, I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback have a truly just fantastic spring practice. And I would say that I agree with that assumption. And that holds true for Damon, where he still did a bunch of really nice things this spring in terms of just taking steps in his development. And one of those things was he had just some challenges to work with where he didn't have maybe even his 3 starting receivers for any of spring practice. They were never all on the field at the same time. So that's something to keep in mind. But then on top of all of that, it's something where I just look at it and say, not only the chemistry that he built with the backups was that important, but it was just some of the plays that he was able to make. Just seeing those in spurts were just so critical when I think about the future of what Damon Williams is going to be able to do and just what he brings to the table as a quarterback. And I think about that from a mental perspective as well, where he's always been really good at finding ways to keep his head up. And that was something that really stood out to me when he first got here as a early enrollee true freshman in 2024. And he kept his head up and he wasn't just tucking and running and trying to make plays with his legs and leaning on that like a lot of young quarterbacks like to do. He was engaged. He kept his head up and said, I know that I need to make a play with my arm first, or think about doing that before I can just tuck my head and try to pick up 6-7 yards and do whatever else. And that's something that Jimmy Doherty said he wants to continue to see him do over the course of the summer before they get back to UW for fall camp. So that's something I'm going to keep an eye on. And the reason I want to start with all that is when I look at Damon Williams, he is such a perfect fit in this Jedd Fisch offense. And I think he is the perfect quarterback to run this system to a T. Where look at who he had at Arizona. And I know we bring this up all the time, but it's worth mentioning. When you think about Jaden DeLora, when you think about Noah Fafita, it's not necessarily just that they're smaller guys and that they're agile guys. It's the fact that it's how agile they are and how effective they are throwing on the move. It was something we saw Noah Fafita do a lot in 2023, and it's something that Jaden DeLora did very well before then. And I look at what Damon could do with that. He's got, in my opinion, better arm talent than both of those guys. He is more athletic than both of those guys. And that's something where bringing that all to Washington is really exciting, and it's really fun to see. And it was something that was a small point of discussion on a couple of different shows during the 2024 season. Was Will Rogers was certainly the right choice to play quarterback for as long as he did, because you didn't want to just throw a true freshman out there behind that offensive line and just basically throw him to the wolves at different points. When I think about the Michigan game and I think about, the Iowa game, if he had started the first half of that Penn State game and what that would have looked like with Abdul Carter. But I just look at what Will Rogers did, and he was very effective for different points in time before the offensive line really started to deteriorate. But the problem was that he wasn't mobile enough to run everything that Jedd Fisch wants to call in his playbook. When I think about some of the sprint outs, some of the bootlegs, some of the different things that are in this offense, which is particularly designed for quarterbacks of Damon Williams' skill set. So I look at all that and I say, I'm very intrigued to see what that's going to look like moving forward. And I think that might honestly, at the end of the day, be the most important thing when it comes to Damon living up to this ranking of number 2, or really just making it inside the top 5, is Jedd Fisch's offense will unlock him in ways that I don't think every college coach around the country would be able to do. I look at all this and I say, I really do believe in what Jedd is doing from a quarterback development standpoint, because we've seen him do it before. We've seen him take really talented quarterbacks and maximize their abilities throughout his career. And I think this could kind of be the pinnacle of that, with not just what Jedd has built in terms of the skill players around him, and plus Damon's talent level, but it's just the way it all meshes together so well. And I know our buddy Scotty Graham posted something over on Twitter of one of those mesh plays that Jedd likes to run, where I think it was called Super Mesh, where there were 5 guys just all running those routes over the middle. And I can't remember who it was, but broke free and just ended up taking a 50-plus yard catch against Washington State during his time in Arizona in 2023. But I think about plays like that and just what Damon can do to just extend plays and get outside the pocket with his legs and break, contain, and do all these different things on top of being able to make, obviously, the mesh route is a fairly simple concept and it's a very easy throw to make that. But all of those different things that Damon is able to do on top of running the system effectively. And when some of these plays do get shut down, the ability that he has to just put his foot in the ground and run, just at the snap of a finger, he is gone. He is 10, 15 yards downfield because he has that level of speed and acceleration. That's what really takes him over the top. And this offense allows him to do that so well. That's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And just a quick reminder, for shout out to UW women's soccer goalie Mia Hamant. If you want to go just learn a little bit more about her fight against kidney cancer and everything, the link to her GoFundMe is down in the description below. Please go check that out and consider donating. Shout out to her, Nicole Van Dyke, the entire women's soccer team, her family, all of that sort of stuff, everything that's gone on over there. Much love and support coming from our side, from everybody in the Husky community. It's been wonderful to see everybody rally around her. So again, the link to her GoFundMe, if you feel like donating, is down in the description below. And while you're there, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get this podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.